Hello. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to this podcast today from Cardinal News and Keep Our Republic. Cardinal News is a nonprofit, nonpartisan newsroom. We cover Southwest and Southside Virginia. Keep Our Republic is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization committed to safeguarding the vitality of America's democracy by promoting trust in elections and constitutional checks and balances, as well as the rule of law. You might say trust and transparency has never been more important in our election process and never more examined. And that is why we're bringing together this panel of Virginia's trusted election registrars to answer some questions from the Virginians themselves. So we'll be talking about ballot security, election day procedures. This panel is here to explain what it's really like, what the electoral process is like, the safety and security of our system here in Virginia, especially. So I'd like each of our panelists, we have three, to introduce themselves and say where they're located and their title. Let's start with Derek.
I'm the Director of Elections and General Registrar in Washington County, Virginia. I'm in Abingdon today.
All right. And then Jackie?
Hi, my name is Jackie Harris. I am the Chief Deputy Registrar or Director of Elections in Nelson County, Virginia.
My name is Blakely Morris, and I am the General Registrar Director of Elections in the city of Bristol, Virginia.
Great. Thank you all so much. We've got some variety here in our geography. I would like for you all to explain your role as a registrar. I think a lot of people know, oh, they have something to do with elections, but maybe not everyone understands it fully. So one of you, and I'll start with you, Derek, what is your role as a registrar? How do you participate in Virginia's electoral process?
Kind of stepping back from Election Day for just a moment, because a lot of people think that Election Day is the day that we have a lot to do, and we certainly do. But we have a lot to do the rest of the year also. One of our primary responsibilities is to manage and maintain the voter registration list in each of our localities. When someone who resides in Washington County registers to vote, that registration application comes through our office. It's reviewed to ensure that the potential voter is qualified to be a registered voter. We process that and then notify the voter that they've been registered. In addition to just registering voters, we also have the important responsibility of maintaining the voting rolls to make sure that they're up to date and we have correct information on our voting rolls. So, we're continuously receiving data on individuals who have moved, individuals who have passed away, and then individuals who, for whatever reason, may no longer be qualified to vote. So, it's really a year-round job, pulling together data from lots of different sources to ensure that our list of registered voters is as accurate and up to date as possible, so that when Election Day rolls around, we've got the best possible list for our election officials to work with.
Jackie or Blakely, I'm curious as to why, if you want to share, what got you interested in this type of job? Like, why elections? Why the electoral process? How did you end up in this job? Let me ask you, Jackie.
I got into elections initially in early 1991. I was working for a women's center and I was taking phone calls and I would post jobs on a board. And there was a call from the local electoral board saying, we need someone who's interested in mathematics because we're about to go into redistricting. So the decennial redistricting was about to occur. And I was like, gee, I'm into mathematics, threw my own hat in the ring and was hired to assist before there was even a computer in any of our offices to do redistricting in Albemarle County. So 740 square miles of maps on the floor and drawing lines. And that was my foray into elections and have been here ever since.
And Blakely, you are now registrar are you in Bristol? You have been in Washington County, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I was the deputy there.
How'd you get interested in it?
Well, I have always had an interest in government, in presidential history, that type of thing. Even as a small kid, When I graduated college, there was an opening here in Bristol's office, and I applied and got the job. And I've been doing this since I was 22. So I love my job, love my career, made a career out of it.
Awesome. How is Virginia's electoral process different or unique among the rest of the states? Who wants to take that one?
Right now, there's actually a study committee in the legislature that's studying perhaps moving Virginia to even numbered year elections. So they met this year, they'll meet next year again. But that is one of our major distinctions, is the fact that we vote every year. We have a full-blown general election every year, whereas most states have their statewide or federal elections only in even numbered years, and will do small municipals, et cetera, outside of that. So Virginia is relatively unique in that respect. And there's some other things that we do. Some of the data we collect is broader than what other states collect. So there's distinctions. But that's one of the biggest is our annual general election.
Derek Lau, you kind of laughed when I asked that question. So is that the same answer that came to mind for you? Is just the years?
Each state has their own nuances. How they manage voter registration, election procedure, and what have you. But I think I think that's a sign of the decentralized election system that we have in the United States. There's really each state is left to come up with their own rules and procedures for the conduct of elections.
All right, this next question is a doozy, and we can probably guess the answer, but I will ask it. What is the biggest challenge in working with the public on elections? And I dare say it's become more challenging in the last decade or so, without putting words in your mouth. It's just the reality we're in right now. So who wants to jump at that, talking about it? It might also talk about in general misconceptions. These might go hand in hand.
Well, certainly, I think election administration and the conduct of elections in general have taken on much more interest amongst the public in recent years. And I think in many ways that's a good thing, that people are interested and they're asking asking questions. And I never hesitate to sit down or have a conversation with someone who has questions about how the election process works. And a lot of times people have concerns and aren't sure how the election process works. I think one good thing about the election system here in the United States, I mentioned a moment ago how our election system is very much decentralized. We have no central control at the federal level. Each state is left to develop their own system, and even within the states, each locality in many states, while there's certainly uniformity within the state, you have each locality responsible for administering their own elections. That's certainly the case here in Virginia. And one of the things I think that's very helpful, that I find that's very helpful, is the people who are working in elections, whether it be those of us that work full time in my office throughout the year, or just the election officials who come in to help out with early voting or just help out on election day. They're members of the community, and they're neighbors. Their kids go to school with voters' kids. Last week I had a election official in here who's a recently retired teacher, and she was helping with early voting as an election official. And the number of former students that she had come through the door that day was, it was unbelievable. The number of former students, people that she knew from her career in the school system. And I think from the voters' perspective, to walk in to vote and see someone that they know from elsewhere in life, someone that they know and trust, to see them being a part of the election process, I think that's something that really helps create more security in the mind of the voters. That it's really the people who are administering the elections are their neighbors. and members of their community.
Blakely, what do you run into there in Bristol in terms of, maybe misconceptions or just challenges?
It basically boils down to outreach. I mean, you have to explain to people, bring them in, if someone has a question about our voting equipment or, how we process voter registrations and, things like that, you have to explain because, their dealings with us usually are once a year, maybe twice a year. They don't really maybe understand the process. And even though the entire state of Virginia has different size localities and we all might have a different, set of, things going on or whatever, generally we all do things the same way because we're statutorily required to. So, but I think outreach is a big part of it.
But yeah, so outreach, as in what y'all put out maybe officially, but also just the one-on-one conversations you probably have with Derek. If
Correct.
someone walks in your office and wants to know, hey, A, B, and C, or I read this somewhere, what's going on? That one-on-one, face-to-face contact with someone who is local, even if they've never met you, Derek, they might, when you walk in to vote on election day, we see the people in our community. So that's a great thing.
And one thing I hear repeatedly is, voters who come in and ask questions, they'll say, I don't have concerns about what's happening here locally. I'm concerned about what's happening elsewhere.
Mhm.
And I think it's just kind of not being sure about how things happen elsewhere in Virginia or elsewhere in the country. But there seems to be more trust of what's happening in your own local community than perhaps what's happening elsewhere.
Right. Good point. If I say the name Eric, that probably means to most people that that's just a person's name. Eric is an acronym in election official circles, and that's what I'm dealing with right here. So who wants to explain what Eric is before I get to my question? Jackie, off the top of your head, what is Eric?
Eric was a system that was used by a number of states to share data across state lines. A number of states pulled out of that compact within the last several years. So it was larger at one point, and has been replaced in several places, including in Virginia, with one-on-one agreements with individual states, and not this organization that was created by a group of secretaries of state, so that the governing body of ERIC was secretaries of states of the participating state agency. So it was a bipartisan group at the time, but I think it just grew to be more controversial over the course of time. And as I said, several states withdrew, including Virginia, from participating in the ERIC program.
Since Virginia withdrew, did that change your workflow at all? Derek, Blakely, or Jackie, was it easier to, or did you notice much of a change in terms of your job?
Blakely and I are very close to the Tennessee state line. Blakely's in the city of Bristol, right on the border, and I can be in Tennessee in 15 minutes. Tennessee was not a member of ERIC, so and that's where we have a lot of our cross migration back and forth between the state line. We regularly receive updated information about registration moves from the state of Tennessee, and I think my understanding is that the Commonwealth of Virginia has entered into an agreement now with the state of Tennessee to help facilitate the exchange of data between the two states. So, I think that has certainly helped us out here in Southwest Virginia, those of us who are near the state line, to get data from Tennessee on a regular basis. I can't really speak to the exchange of data. We receive data from a multitude of states, but as far as how much impact the exit from ERIC was, we're still receiving quite a bit of data on a regular basis. So I can't really speak to what changes have occurred in that data flow, because we're still receiving quite a bit of data.
The term voter fraud gets thrown out there, and there are accusations of that, but just that general term. You all are actually doing this job full-time, year-round, for many, many years. All of you have a lot of experience in elections. On the average in the past, let's say maybe over the last 5 years, how often have you actually come across an intentional case of someone trying to commit voter fraud, like really trying to do that instead of it's a clerical error or an oversight or something? Does anyone want to speak to that?
In my almost 20 years in election administration, I have personally never seen it.
Over the course of my career, I've seen people do things that I think were what I would call kind of unintentional voter fraud. I had many years ago a father who filled out absentee ballot applications for his entire family. We, from records, could kind of see that this was his handwriting on everything. One of his family members had already cast a vote, and it appeared to be an attempt to vote a second time. And we reached out and talked to our attorneys, et cetera, but went forward and basically asked him, did he do this? And he insisted he didn't, until I said, well, the individual in your family who already voted is a military member and is facing potential major ramifications from this. And then he said, oh yeah, well, I did. And I said, well, never do that again. And I don't think they're going to press charges against you, but I don't think it was his intent anything other than to have each of his family members receive a ballot, but that's just not how you do it. So intentional fraud, when it was, I've not seen anything broadly happen. I've been in this a long time, so I've certainly seen things happen, but not to any great degree.
What is the incidence of simple like clerical errors, paperwork errors? Paperwork back in the day, it would be all on paper, but like someone trying to vote in the wrong district after a move or something like that. That to me seems like something that could easily happen. But as you said, just a mistake, and it's like, whoops! Oh, thanks for telling me. I'll go over here and vote. Does that happen a lot, to where it would skew numbers or make them not trustworthy from the numbers that y'all are pulling and putting out there?
Things like that happen. I certainly wouldn't classify that in the category of fraud. But I think a lot of times what happens is, a voter moves across town and they just assume that, I can go back to my former polling place. And Virginia law actually allows for a certain period of time, even after you move, you can go back to your former polling place and vote. But it's very, very easy to resolve. And a lot of times what happens, we have voter registration through the DMV now, and a lot of times someone has updated their address information through the DMV and do not even realize that when they updated their address at the DMV that information comes to us. So a lot of times it's just a matter of redirecting voters to the correct precinct. We spend a lot of our time on election day just getting voters to the correct place if they showed up at the wrong precinct.
Virginia adopted same-day registration not that long ago. So if someone is where they should be, but not registered there, or we can get them to where they should be, to the proper polling location, and have them fill out a same-day registration. That's a fail-safe that's available. It's a provisional ballot, but it is a fail-safe. And as long as there's no issue that we could detect, because there's a lot of data sharing immediately after the election to assure us that no voter has attempted to register to vote in multiple jurisdictions or in multiple precincts, there's a full-blown data check on that. And once we can determine that that was the one and only, and they provided their ID and all the things that we needed, we can add that voter and that provisional vote can be cast. So there's a lot of fail-safes in place that might not have been there 10 years ago.
So now let's talking more about fail-safe measures and just the whole safety of the process. What specific measures are in place in your localities? We've got Nelson County, Bristol, and Washington County to ensure that the voting machines and ballot counting systems are secure from tampering, because people, that term also gets thrown around and accusations are made. But really, is that something people should be worried about, tampering with the machines or the ballots, the paper ballots, if you're using paper ballots and then putting them into the machine? Tell us about that.
Here in Bristol, we have a secure site that we keep our voting equipment as well as our ballots. It is monitored 24 hours. We have cameras and that type of thing, on the doors, so we know who goes in and out, who has access. And I mean, we always have someone with our equipment at all times. There's someone beside of it or right at it at all times. So, and I think that's very important too, to have a chain of custody and people, always there, a witness to it.
Well, that's a great point, Blakely. It's old tech. Cameras are old, but to let people know there's a camera on the door. You can't just sneak in and not be noticed. So that's good information. What about Jackie, you or Derek? You want to chime in on that?
We use, we have access cards, so it'll identify who accesses the secure storage room. Of course, everyone in the Commonwealth does logic and accuracy testing on our voting systems. That includes our local bipartisan electoral board. Party representatives can be present during that to observe. They can see the documentation that we put forth, including the seal numbers that are placed on those machines at the time that we finish that testing. And then they can verify on election morning that those same seal numbers are what are still on those systems, that there's a zero count of votes cast on those at the time they're locked down. And when they're opened again on election day, there is a large chain of custody string there that shows everything from seals to numbers to who's had their hands on the machines at any point in time. So we do have a lot of documentation that really protects that, and a lot of security measures wrapped around it as well. So I think that we have some of the most secure systems in the United States.
Yeah, our processes are very, very similar to Nelson County and City of Bristol. All of our voting equipment in Virginia, it's air gapped. It's not connected to the internet.
What is air gapped?
Well, what I would say is, there's no connection to any network, to the internet. There's no wireless connection, either hardwired or wireless connection to the internet. And there's really not a way for bad actors to access the equipment, because there's no connection there to cause problems with the ballot tabulation equipment.
That's a great point about air gapped, so to speak, because we're in a digital age, and all of this used to be on paper. Y'all may have been, or I don't want to accuse you of being a certain age, but you've been around long enough to where you've seen this huge advances in technology and things going to electronics. So that's a really good point, Derek. I would love to know, once the polls have closed, all the votes are in, everyone's dismissed, what happens next? Does Virginia have a certain regulations to where at every precinct in the state, throughout all these localities, you have to follow a certain rigid procedure, as in, where do the machines go? Who takes them? How many people have access? You've touched on that, but if a suspicious person looks for something, anything to grasp onto. So I want you to just let us know what that process is for continued security once the polls are closed.
I'll just kick off. Once polls close, the voting equipment prints receipts, much like you would get when you go to CVS, get long receipts, and the results are printed on that. And then, in most localities, the election officials in the precinct will pick up the phone and call our offices and say, for governor, these are the numbers, lieutenant governor, so on and so forth. And then that gets entered into the state system, so that election results get reported out to the public. But once that's done, the equipment is locked down. The media drive, the removable media drive that holds all the data from the election results, that is removed on election night, and that is sealed in an official envelope. And then that comes back to the circuit court clerk's office, and those removable media drives are secured in the courthouse until well after the deadline for any recount or contest of the election passes, so that if there are any issues or any questions, that data is safely secure at the courthouse in the circuit court clerk's office. All other data comes back on election night, results tapes and what have you, and then all of that is reviewed during the canvass following the election to ensure that what gets reported on election night matches up with what the actual paperwork from the voting equipment shows.
Anything that's, you know, a sensitive matter like ballots and, you know, as Derek said, the media drives, you know, any other information, all the paperwork, you know, all the official stuff does come back. It's not left in a precinct per se or anything like that. It's brought back that night under lock and key. So that way it's very secure. And then, as he said, also, you know, we have the canvass of votes the next day. It's the official meeting to review all the results that we entered the night before. And we have our bipartisan electoral boards review all of that and make sure that we entered our numbers correctly and everything is good to go. And but that's the reason why it's called unofficial results on election night. So.
Thank you for laying that out and explaining the process, which I'm sure you all take very seriously. What do you go through to be employed in the registrar's office, part-time or full-time? And what about the volunteers who are staffing the polls? Are there background checks? Is that possible? How do you assure people of that side of it, of the people handling these things, being, you know, I guess, you know, just making sure you're looking into everything in today's world?
I can speak to that. So to become employed in a elections office, the general registrar / director of elections, and that's a dual title used pretty frequently now, is an appointee of the bipartisan electoral board that is over that particular jurisdiction, whether it's a city or a county. And so those individuals are appointed by the circuit court, judge of circuit court, usually from names provided by the party chair that's entitled to have that seat on the board. So it's a, you know, multi-step process and review to establish that body. They select their general registrar and appoint them. And then it depends on the jurisdiction as to what degree of other screening is done, but typically the same screening that's done with most employees, I think, in most jurisdictions. So whether that includes drug testing, background checks, those sorts of things, I've been fingerprinted, you know, whatever the jurisdiction may require. So that's the staffing part of it. For our officers of election, again, the party chairs are asked to send to the electoral board a list of individuals that they would like to serve as officers of election before the appointment process begins in February. So there's a balance that each polling place is supposed to have a balance between Republican and Democratic, and then you can fill in the blanks with unaffiliated officers. We don't register by political party in Virginia, so these aren't people that are registered Republicans, registered Democrats. These are simply the nominees of those party chairs in the locality, saying these are individuals that I have faith in. Then those officers of election take an oath saying, I will perform these duties impartially. So, you know, that political side falls by the wayside at that point. The actual administration of elections is completely nonpartisan or neutral in that respect. But again, they're coming from referrals. The electoral board makes the appointments. So if they have an objection, they can say, you know, this individual that came over, for whatever reason, there's an objection to them serving, and they're going to not utilize that individual. So that's kind of the balance there.
What about the training that the poll workers receive, you know, in preparation for elections themselves on security and just the handling of the whole thing? And can you tell if the training is effective? Do you feel like it's working pretty well?
The state provides training standards that we have to follow. And then, of course, each jurisdiction has extra or added on things because, some of us have different types of voting equipment and, what have you. In my experience, the training's very helpful and imperative really for every election because, people that work the polls only work a couple days a year in most cases, and you might forget how something should be completed or, stuff like that. So the training is very important, and we always provide them with, guides and material to help them through. And all the workers that I've ever worked with also are really good about contacting us if they have any questions or need help with anything. So it does work well.
Is that an in-person training, or do they get sent like online modules, or how's that training done?
There is an online module that the state provides, but we always do in person. I think it's better. And that way they can ask questions and see, the voting equipment hands-on and our poll book system hands-on and that type of thing. And I think it's very helpful that way.
By and large, the people who volunteer to serve in these roles on election day, they're engaged. They're very interested in wanting to help their communities and to do a good job. So when they come to training, they pay attention. They ask good questions, and I think it is very, very, very helpful, and I think it helps to prepare them for election day.
And a lot of times, officers of election, they work for many, many years. I have one here that's been doing this for over 30 years. I know Derek has one even for much longer than that. So, and then they mentor and train the newer ones coming in. So, and that's very important. That's hands-on training is very important. So,
and going to that, state law mandates that there can be no fewer than 3 election officials working in a polling place on election day. Here in Washington County, the minimum that we do for our smallest precincts is 4. And like Blakely said, those who have been working for a number of years mentor the newer election officials, and we can do training all day long, but it's that mentorship and that hands-on work that really enables our election officials to be successful.
How are you staffed? Do you have enough poll workers in general? Are you having any hard time getting people to do that? And are the poll workers paid? What's the situation there?
We do have a core of that have been here a long time. And I think just like we're seeing somewhat in the industry as a whole, that there's some turnover about to happen, that I think that there's election, people at our level that are exiting just because they've been here a long time, or it's just not what they signed up for. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of turnover in this generation of poll workers that we have that have been serving, as they were saying, 20, 30 years is not that unusual. So we have yet to really have a shortage, but I can anticipate that there might be, sort of a wave here that might be transitional, where we're going to start looking for additional people to fill some of these slots. And we hope it's not a challenge. I think that the volunteer generation doesn't necessarily have the same amount of time available to them to take these. I would like you here at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to stay until like 9 o'clock at night and work a really long day. I don't know that those people are out there to the degree they used to be. So we hope that they are. But right now we've not had any issues filling it, but anticipate it might be an issue.
I've been lucky. I probably have about 20, 25 people on my list right now that I do not have a place to place them on election day. Now, one thing I will say is, Washington County is relatively large. It's over 560 square miles. So I have a population center here in Abingdon and a couple other small population centers, but I have a lot of rural outlying areas, portions of the county as well. A lot of those 25 people that I have on my list are from here in the Abingdon area for the most part. And, sometimes I have in some of my more outlying communities farther away from the center of the county, sometimes I have a little more difficulty placing people. And sometimes some of those people who live here in Abingdon are a little reluctant to drive at 4:30 a.m. on election morning,
Right.
45 minutes or an hour away from home, in the fog, dodging deer, et cetera. So, you know, I have no trouble filling positions here in Abingdon. Sometimes in those more outlying communities, it's a little bit more of a challenge. But as of right now, we have all of our positions filled for election day, and I'll just keep my fingers crossed that we don't have many who need to drop out at the last minute.
Did early voting, the advent of that, which some people still, there's plenty of people who are still voting on election day, of course, but that make your jobs easier or harder?
Well, actually, I was going to add that to the last question. I think that has helped take some of the pressure off of precincts. In other words, people, there being so many people needed on election day. I know here in Bristol last year for the presidential race, 50% of my turnout already had voted by election day. I'm not sure how the state, the rest of the localities were, but I know that's how it was here. And I know my precinct workers all said that it seemed like a much, I won't say easier day, but it seemed to flow better because there wasn't so many people, and it wasn't so busy. We didn't have really long lines or anything like that. Early voting, I think, has helped with that.
To wrap up, I'll give you each a chance to briefly just say, if you had one thing you could say to the public about the election process in Virginia, what would you say? Obviously, you have a job. This is your job. So you want it to be represented well, but I'll start with you, Derek. What would you say to the public?
Sure. Well, I mean, the one thing I would say is if you have questions about how elections are administered in your community, reach out to your local registrar's office, reach out to your local member of the electoral board. I know that my colleagues around the state are always looking for opportunities to have conversations with voters, help answer questions and address concerns that they might have. And, one thing I'll say is a lot of times those people who come to our office and ask questions, have some concerns, have some questions about how the process works, those folks turn into some of our best election officials. A lot of times when people come in and start asking questions and aren't sure, how things work, we'll invite them to sign up to help in the polling place and let them see firsthand how the process works. And I've had several people to do that, and I think it's really opened their eyes to the steps that we take and the procedures that we have in place to ensure that elections here in Virginia are secure and that the results can be trusted.
I'd like them to know that the people that are working the polls and the people in this office are your neighbors. They are people here to administer a function. So this isn't a political process. It's adjacent to a political process, but we really are administering a very well defined process. And so I think they can have some comfort in that. This is, standard bureaucratic procedure. I had to put it that way, but there's not a lot of options for variations on the theme, and it really is safe, secure. And I'll do just a little shout out here is that in Nelson County, one of the things I'm looking for is how to best reach our electorate. We're a rural county with, how it is. I mean, you're in the media, so where media channels are either so diverse or there's not that one go-to channel, a radio station, a television station, a local newspaper, a daily, or anything like that any longer. So to have this informed electorate that we really want to have, what is the best way to reach out to you, individual voters, and tell us how you get your information so that we can keep you abreast of what's happening. And I think that helps the process. So that would be my ask of the public, really.
Before I let Blakely give us his take, shout out, shameless promotion for Cardinal News, because we have a very comprehensive voter guide We're nonpartisan. We just want to serve people with information, and our voter guide at cardinalnews.org has information on every single precinct in Virginia. And we've sent questionnaires to candidates, but we also just give some nuts and bolts information and links to offices and things. So I would encourage you to check that out. Blakely, what would you say to the electorate?
Well, I'm kind of going to echo Derek and Jackie's comments a little bit, but I do think, as I was saying earlier, outreach and, as you were saying, a lot of, there's not a lot of local news and newspapers and things anymore. So, social media, a lot of our offices have some social media presence. Virginia Department of Elections has a great social media, like a Facebook page with lots of information and a website. And, if you have questions, always go to the source, to Department of Elections or our offices, or give us a call. I mean, we're here and that is our job. And, we're here to help.
That's a great point. You're on social media. Hey, here's an idea. Go to Abingdon, go to Washington County's page and find out the details there, or get the contact information, click on the website, or call, like you said. Oh, I'm so grateful for all of your time and for what you do in your jobs. Blakely Morris, General Registrar, City of Bristol. Derek Lyle, also General Registrar for Washington County. And Jackie Harris, Chief Deputy Registrar in Nelson County. Thank you all so much for taking part in this conversation.
Thank you,
Thank
Dutchie.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the
great.
opportunity.
Great to talk to you. And we also want to thank you for listening and engaging in this conversation and just trying to get more informed. And if you want to learn more about how elections work and how you can be part of protecting democracy, visit keepourrepublic.org. And I'm with Cardinal News, and we appreciate this opportunity to partner with Keep Our Republic. I'm Dutchie Jesse. Thank you for joining us.